Welcome to Shad's Guitar Show. Whether it's the gear or the players who made the gear famous, join me each episode as we discuss all things guitar. Well, hey, what's up everyone? Welcome into another exciting episode of Shad's Guitar Show. So glad again that you're joining me for this episode where we're going to get into the topic of roasted maple. We're going to talk about what it is, how they do it, and is there really any value in it. In this day and age, we see a lot of, I don't want to say gimmicks because that's not necessarily the case, and I'm not suggesting that roasted maple is a gimmick. I'm just saying, as the guitar, how do I formulate this correctly? Okay, so people, because of the nature of society that we live in, we get bored with things really quickly, and we're constantly looking for that next cool thing. So guitar manufacturers are trying to keep step with that. So there's got to be new features, new options on guitars that make them attractive, right? If you look at a company like Fender, the Strat, as you go in and buy it today in 2026, is relatively the same as the same one you would have bought if you bought a brand new one in 1954. Now, yes, there are differences, but the differences are subtle, and I think that you can only rename a guitar so many times before it just kind of loses its luster. So what are companies doing to kind of try to gain traction and get people excited about their product? And which of those things are actual real benefits? So I want to look at some of those things, and I want to start today because one of the most common ones that we see now with electric guitars is roasted maple necks. And then, with acoustics now, there's torrefied wood, and that's, meant to simulate a lot of years of playing. And not to say there's no value to any of this stuff, but, first thing we need to do is dive in and talk about what it is and see if we think maybe it's something worth checking out. But before I do that, I just wanted to say again, as I've been saying the last few episodes, if you're enjoying the show and you want to support me in some small way, $1, $5, whatever, you'll find in the show notes a link to my Venmo, which you can, send me a few dollars to support my need for new strings. If you can't do that, equally cool would be if you would just leave a comment and let me know you're enjoying the show and tell me where you're from. I'd really like to know that as well. So, yeah, that's it. Let's get into this episode on roasted maple. If you're shopping for a new guitar or browsing Sweetwater at midnight, like I know some of you do, you've probably seen it listed as a feature. That warm amber brown color, that silky smooth feel. But what actually is roasted maple? How do they make it? And more importantly, does it actually make your guitar play and sound better, or is it just a pretty upsell? Well, let's get into it. First things first, roasted maple, also called torrefied maple or heat-treated maple, is exactly what it sounds like. It's maple wood that's been put through a controlled high heat process. We're not talking about someone sliding a guitar neck into a kitchen oven. This is a precision industrial process. The wood gets heated in a low oxygen or oxygen-free environment at temperatures typically somewhere between 350 and 425 degrees Fahrenheit, and sometimes higher, for an extended period of time. We're talking hours, sometimes days, depending on the method and the target result. The low oxygen environment is critical. Without it, you'd just be burning the wood. By controlling the atmosphere, you get a deep, even cook all the way through the material. Now, what's actually happening chemically? Well, the heat drives out moisture, virtually all of it. It also breaks down the hemicellulose in the wood's cell structure. Hemicellulose is the component of the wood that is most hygroscopic, meaning it's the part that loves to soak up and release moisture from the air. When you cook that out, you're fundamentally changing how the wood interacts with the environment. The result is a piece of maple that is dramatically more stable than it was before. The process starts with selecting and kiln drying the maple in a normal way, getting it down to standard moisture content. Then the blanks, or sometimes already shaped necks, go into a specialized oven or kiln chamber. The chamber is sealed and either nitrogen or steam is pumped in to displace the oxygen. That's what prevents combustion. The temperature is ramped up slowly. You don't just blast it with heat right away, or you'd risk cracking or uneven treatment. Then it holds at a target temperature for the prescribed time, and then it's brought back down slowly. Thermal shock is real with wood, just like it is with glass. When it comes out, the wood has changed color from the inside out. The sugars and resins in the maple caramelize, which is what gives it that gorgeous toasted golden to dark amber look. And here's a cool thing. You can actually dial in the color to some degree by adjusting the temperature and duration. A lighter roast gives you that honey amber. A heavier roast pushes towards darker brown, almost like a vintage piece of wood. The resulting neck blank is noticeably lighter in weight than it was going in because all the moisture mass is gone. It also feels different right away. If you've ever handled a roasted maple neck, you've probably noticed that it has an almost silky, slightly waxy feel to it, even without a finish. That's the surface texture of the stabilized wood. Alright, so that's the what and the how. Now let's talk about the why, because this is where it gets interesting for us as players. Reason number one, stability. And this is a big one. Maple is already a relatively stable tone wood compared to something like mahogany, but it still moves with humidity and temperature changes. The movement is what causes necks to shift, frets to sprout at the ends, and your carefully set up guitar to feel different in the summer versus the winter. Roasted maple has had the primary culprit, the moisture-hungry hemicellulose, cooked away, so the neck simply doesn't react as dramatically to environmental changes. For players who tour, travel, or live somewhere with wild seasonal humidity swings, this is genuinely meaningful. It doesn't mean you can ignore humidity entirely, but that neck is far more resistant to the kind of movement that sends you back to your tech every few months. Reason number two, feel. I already mentioned the texture, but let's go deeper. A lot of players, myself included, really prefer the feel of an unfinished or lightly finished neck. The issue with unfinished maple is that it's porous and will absorb the oils and grime from your hand over time, which can lead to sticky, gunky feel after playing. Roasted maple's denser, more inert surface resists that better. You can run a roasted maple neck unfinished or with just a very light oil treatment, and it'll stay smooth and clean much longer. As compared to a gloss-finished maple neck, night and day for a lot of players. The roasted maple has this natural, broken-in feel right out of the box. And reason number three, the vintage vibe, legitimately. Here's something worth talking about. Old maple necks. We're talking 40, 50, 60-year-old instruments. They've naturally dried out and stabilized over decades of time. The wood has equilibrated. The moisture has long since gone, and a lot of players swear that those old necks just feel and sound better. Roasting it, in a real sense, an attempt to accelerate the aging process, well, you're creating artificially what time does naturally. Whether it's fully replicated a 1959 neck is debatable. I'll leave that argument to the vintage guys, but the physics changes are real and measurable, not just marketing. And number four, tone. Okay, this is maybe the most subjective and the most argued about, so let's address it honestly. The claim is that roasted maple is stiffer, more resonant, and has better sustain than green maple. From a physics standpoint, there is something to it. The roasting process increases the wood's stiffness to weight ratio. The wood is lighter, but not proportionately less stiff. That's generally considered favorable for tone and sustain in the neck. Some luthiers and builders also note that the overtone content shifts a little. That roasted maple can sound a bit warmer and less brittle in the high end compared to unroasted maple, which can sometimes have a very glassy or bright character. But I want to be real with you. The tonal difference is obviously going to be very subtle. If someone swapped your maple neck for a roasted maple neck overnight, you might not be able to identify it blind in a recording. Where you will notice it is in the feel and the long-term stability. That's where roasted maple earns its money. And in the spirit of fairness, let's talk about the downsides, because there are a couple. Cost. Roasted maple necks cost more. The process takes time, energy, and equipment, and that gets passed on to you. On a budget guitar, you're not going to see it. On mid-range and up, it's showing up more and more. Fender, PRS, Warmoth, USACG, and lots of builders are offering it now, but you will pay a premium. Workability. Some woodworkers note that roasted maple is slightly more brittle than unroasted maple. The roasting process does reduce some toughness alongside the moisture. And finally, it's not magic. If the neck isn't cut well, the truss rod isn't installed properly, or the fretwork is sloppy, roasted maple doesn't fix any of that. It's a material upgrade, not a substitute for good craftsmanship. Alright, so there you have it, roasted maple. It's a real process with real science behind it. It genuinely improves stability and feel, and for the right players, it's absolutely worth seeking out. If you're someone who travels with your instrument, plays in different climates, or just loves the warm vintage look and silky feel under your hands, I'd highly encourage you to at least try one. If you've enjoyed this episode on roasted maple, make sure to share it with a guitar playing friend, and also, wherever you're listening, leave a 5-star review. I cannot tell you how helpful that is to the show, and I greatly appreciate you helping me with that. Also, when you get over to YouTube today, and you know you will, go to Shad's Guitar Show and please subscribe. Also, when you're scrolling Instagram, make sure to get over to Shad's Guitar Show and give me a follow. And I promise you, there's some really cool content at both those places that you can check out as well. Make sure to leave a comment. Let me know where you're from. I'd love to interact with you guys. And as I always say, if you'll continue to listen, I'll continue to talk all things guitar.